Hey guys, it's JP back for another video, and today we're going to be exploring Singapore. And like the other videos, we'll be talking about cost, budget, pricing, all of that at the end of the video, so please stay tuned so you could get the breakdown on all of this. But Singapore is beautiful. You can see here how green and lush the country is. And Singapore is actually a city-state, kind of like the Vatican, where basically it is independent of any country. It was actually kicked out of Malaysia in the early 90s. But our first stop here is going to be the Gardens by the Bay because of this Supertree forest. This Gardens by the Bay is right next to the Marina Bay Sands, which is right behind me in this video. And basically it's not just a hotel, there's a casino and this lavish rooftop bar that's there at the Marina Bay Sands Resort. So if you have the means, by all means check it out. But here we are at this Supertree forest here, and these are basically a set of artificial trees that are really something else. While visiting the Gardens by the Bay is free, some of the activities here do cost a bit of money, and so you can see that skyway there, which is a fee that you would need to pay for. They had this exhibit right next to the Supertree, which is basically a bunch of these little bears that are painted to represent each country, and these are actually represented by the country's artist. Our first stop is this observatory in one of these Supertrees, and it basically gives you a very nice clean view of the entire skyline of Singapore. And so we decided to stop here for a minute and check things out. Again, it does cost money to get into the observatory here, but you can see how pretty the skyline views are at this location. And it is a very picturesque view of the entire bay. As you can see, it is quite beautiful. There is also a small coffee shop for snacks if you're in the mood for that, so that is something that you can also check out. The rest of the time we spent at the Gardens by the Bay, we just explored, and basically they had little sections of this Gardens by the Bay dedicated to certain areas of the world. In this case, this is the Chinese garden. Now, what's cool about Singapore is that it is a very global city. You're going to find a lot of different cultures, Malay and other, that are represented throughout the city in terms of their food and in terms of their architecture. This is another section of the Gardens by the Bay where you have this succulent forest, and so you can see a lot of cacti in this little area. They also have this free aquarium there, and as you can see, this gardens, you can spend the entire afternoon just strolling through it. We did see these little lizards. Initially I thought this was an alligator, but it was just a very big lizard that you could see kind of strolling all throughout this area of the garden, so just be aware of that. Moving on, you could see the flower dome to my left in this part of the video, and you can see that Ferris wheel off in the distance, and that Ferris wheel is across another section of Singapore. But we walked through this, and we will be returning later at night basically to catch the light show, and that light show is something impressive. But here we are going back in the evening to check out this light show. We also had tickets for that skyway, which we will be appreciating later, and so this is how it looks at night, which is quite amazing. Now, this light show is free, so if you were here in the weekend, it plays every half hour after 7, and it is best observed from the ground, but seeing it from up above also, it's very pretty as well. And this is basically a light show with music of John Williams playing in the background. I'm not allowed to play the music of John Williams because of licensing issues, but it's quite a fun show, and like I said, it plays every half hour, and you can see the crowd right below there, so it's a pretty cool event and quite the spectacle here. They played a little bit of Harry Potter, a little bit of Star Wars. They also had some Disney music involved there, so it was a pretty entertaining show with the music. And we all enjoyed this. This is the view from the Skyway, and so you get an idea of how great everything looks from this angle. And walking the Skyway, you only have about a 15-minute time where you can stay on that Skyway. But the show lasts for just about that amount of time. It's about a 15 to 20-minute show. A little bit more about Singapore. Singapore is translated directly as Lion City, and so you're going to see the representation of the city by this merlion. And as we make our way towards the Marina Bay Sands, like I said, it's really close. You saw that Helix Bridge that we passed by, and that is something that connects part of Singapore's other side of the river to where we are. That big dome over there is the Apple Store, and we actually make our way over here to watch another light show. In this area, the Marina Bay Sands, they have another light show. This is the Light Spectre and Sound Show, and in terms of this show, they don't have any John Williams music, and I would say it's not nearly as entertaining as the Supertree light show, but it's still pretty cool. It reminded me a little bit about the Bellagio light show, but I still wouldn't put it in that same category in terms of entertainment. It is a pretty entertaining show, but I wouldn't say it's up there with the Bellagio show. If you haven't already hit that like button, it does help with promoting the video, and I'd certainly appreciate it. But getting back to the video, after we did the whole light thing at night, we decided to take a walk through some of Singapore's sectional towns. This is Chinatown. We also walk over to Little India, and you can see this little China market here in their Chinatown square. A lot of cheap goods, a lot of cheap souvenirs that you can maybe negotiate with the vendors. They also had a lot of durian fruit. Durian is a pretty popular fruit in these parts, and if you've ever had durian fruit, you know how bad it smells, and it said it was forbidden to take the durian fruit into the hotel for the smell that it left, so just be warned. But this was an Indian Hindu temple that was something that we crossed upon in our walk to Little India. And as we walk through Little India, we passed by a lot of different hawker stalls. Hawker stalls are basically little areas where you could get some cheap, affordable snacks. We're making our way over to Merlion Park here, but these hawker stalls are all over the place, and these hawker stalls are a very cheap alternative. Singapore is not a cheap place, and so you're going to see lots of restaurants that do sell food at very, very high premiums, but going to these hawker stalls, you can get a decent meal for on the cheap, and here's us having a small little meal there at one of those hawker stalls. At the Hainanese chicken rice, which is a traditional dish of Singapore, and believe it or not, those hawker stalls are actually an UNESCO recognized culinary thing for Singapore, so it's not just cheap food, it's actually a pretty important part of the culture. But we made our way through that Helix Bridge and making our way towards the Flower Dome and Cloud Forest, which we will do later on here, but we stopped at this mall, which was at the Marina Bay Sands. But we made our way to the Flower Dome and the Cloud Forest, and the really amazing thing about this is not necessarily the plants, because we know Singapore is known for their gardens, but it's this giant dome that surrounds everything. And I think that actually creates this massive, amazing little backdrop for your photos. And this area is quite a pretty place, but it is quite expensive to see these attractions, and in my opinion, maybe a little overpriced, considering that it is not a very large dome or a large space. Still, nonetheless, when you're in Singapore, you got to do these things, I guess. But really beautiful place. We were there, and I think there was a wedding reception being held in the restaurant at this flower dome. But you could see all of the different types of flowers and succulents that they have in this area. Again, very pretty, very beautiful space, and really nice to look at, particularly at night when everything inside the dome is lit up. But again, slightly overpriced in my opinion. You can find other experiences that might be a little bit better. Walking around the Gardens by the Bay itself for free is generally much better than taking part in the Flower Dome if you can't afford to. And the second part of this, we do explore the cloud forest, which is just another area right next to the Flower Dome. And the amazing thing with this cloud forest is this giant waterfall that you walk right into, and it's just a beautiful thing to see at night, where you just have this waterfall. And they had this Jurassic Park attraction, and so they had all of these animatronic dinosaurs that were also scattered throughout the cloud forest. And again, just an interesting visual, and my son enjoyed it. He does like Jurassic Park a whole lot, but was it worth it? Again, that's subject to opinion, but I do feel like it was an overpriced attraction. The way I felt about the cloud forest was like taking up the line to go on a Jurassic Park ride at Disney World, except at the end of the line, you didn't get on a ride. It was basically just walking through the entire dome and hoping at the end that there would be this nice little ride at the end, but you never get there. So in that way, it wasn't really that great. They had this little entertaining end bit here where my son took part, and he was kind of doing a little bit of audience participation. And that ended our trip here, but we can't leave Singapore without going again through the airport, and this airport is something else. They have this Vortex at the very end here, but while you take this in, let me just talk price briefly. We spent $440 on lodging. We spent $548 on transportation in Singapore. The food, we only spent about $80 on those hawker stalls, like I mentioned, and we did spend about $159 on various activities, leaving a grand total of about $1,227, leaving a per day average of about $409 per day. They had this amazing mall that was right at the airport. That was one of the things that was a feature in and of itself, was their airport. And so just landing in Singapore was something else. But we certainly enjoyed Singapore despite the hefty price, and it was still quite an amazing experience. I certainly would recommend it to anybody. But next stop here is going to be Indonesia. We're going to Bali.